What a reading. A story within a story, but also an intro that reconnects us with another story. We start with Jesus and his disciples taking another boat ride. As you'll recall if you were here last week, setting sail on the Sea of Galilee could become quite an adventure at any time. In this passage, the adventure begins not on the water, but the moment they step out of the boat. Jesus is becoming well known in spite of telling the people he heals not to tell anyone about him. A crowd immediately forms around him. So many people that it's impossible to move without bumping into or being bumped by someone. Suddenly, a man shows up, pushing his way through the crowd, desperate to reach Jesus. Some people recognize him and move out of his way. Others who recognize him are shocked by his presence. What is a synagogue leader doing coming to Jesus for help? What is Jairus doing here at the feet of Jesus? Are those tears in his eyes? He sounds desperate. He is desperate. Jairus is pleading with Jesus to come to his house and heal his daughter. His precious, precious little girl is terribly sick, and they've done everything. The only hope left is a miracle, and Jairus has come to beg this miracle worker for help. The crowd is stunned. Jairus is a man of authority, a religious leader, and he is coming to Jesus, an itinerant teacher and faith healer, begging him to help a child, a girl child at that. So many things about this are so wrong in their traditions. But in spite of what they believe about the value of children as a society, and especially what they believe about the value of girl children, Jairus has the heart of a parent. In that moment, he doesn't see his daughter as an expendable commodity. He sees her as the precious baby he has loved and nurtured and held in his arms for the past 12 years. He can't imagine his life without her, and he has released all but that one identity, Daddy, to his very ill child. We know he adores her, even though we don't know her name. Jairus has spoken of her the way all us parents talk about our kids, no matter how old those kids become. He called his 12-year-old his little girl. He called her baby, even though she'd reached the age where many fathers would be attempting to marry off their daughters. Baby girl was sick, and her daddy would do anything, even beg, to get her help. So Jesus began walking with him, as quickly as they could, with a curious crowd pressing in all around them. Every step they were jostled, bumped, and banged. But suddenly, Jesus stopped, turned around, and asked a most curious question given the circumstances. Who touched me? The disciples were perplexed. Why ask such a silly question? Everybody was touching everybody. They were so crowded together, it was impossible to move without touching somebody. But Jesus had felt something, an intentional touch. He felt power go from his body to another human, and he wanted to know who that person was. With great fear and trepidation, a woman spoke up and admitted her brash action. A woman. She explained with a very shaky voice that she was desperate. She'd been suffering with a hemorrhage for 12 long years. She'd spent all that she had on doctors and cures, but nothing had worked. In fact, she was continuing to get worse. She'd heard of Jesus, and she just knew if she could only touch his robe, just the hem of his clothes, she'd be healed. And she was. She felt it immediately. Seeing her, hearing her story, Jesus was filled with compassion compassion for her, he called her daughter and told her that her faith had made her well. And then he turned and started on the trek to Jairus' house, where the sick girl was waiting for her turn to be healed. But before they could get there, runners from the house came to say it was too late. She died. There was no sense bothering with bringing Jesus. Might as well let him get back to his own agenda. But Jesus had another plan. He told that desperate dad, "Don't worry, only believe." And he continued on his way. When they arrived at the house, the mourners were busy wailing. Jesus tried to disperse them by saying she wasn't dead, only sleeping, but they laughed in his face. Taking only the parents, Peter, James, and John with him, Jesus went to the child. He took her hand, lifted her arm, and spoke to her, "Talitha, come. Little girl, get up." And she did. She immediately arose and started walking around the room. Jesus instructed her parents not to tell anyone what had happened. And then, very practical, get her something to eat. And then he was off to continue his ministry. No time to hang around for profuse appreciation and unending gratitude. So a child who had only lived 12 years and a woman who had been sick 12 years both received healing. But there's more to the healing than recovery from an illness. The woman had been cut off from society for 12 years and had lost all her financial security too. Anyone who was bleeding could not be around other people. There was a very strict taboo to leaking body fluids where others might become contaminated. And making her way through the crowd, she risked being beaten or stoned for daring to come into contact with others, which would make them ceremoniously unclean. In touching Jesus' clothes, she passed her status of unclean on to him. But he completely ignored that. He focused on her need, and he restored her to wholeness, even naming her daughter, which reconnected her with her ancestry as a descendant of Abraham. She would now, for the first time in 12 years, be able to be a part of society and a part of her own family. He gave her life when she'd been merely existing for 12 long, long years. And then he healed a girl who had only lived 12 years, 12 very short years. And restoring her life, he did more than welcome her back to life. He restored her parents as well. With her death, they were about to experience their own cutoff from society. They had just become members in a club nobody wants to join. Even the members of that club don't want to see new members. The club of parents who've lost children is a very lonely place nobody wants to be. Intentionally or not, society banishes grieving parents to that club. Nobody wants to feel their pain. Nobody wants to be reminded that it could happen to them. So when that little girl stood up and began walking, her parents also were given their whole lives back. They were restored to society, restored to themselves. The child was healed and her parents with her, because Jairus was willing to let go of himself and his position long enough to ask for help. Jairus was willing to suspend status and protocol, willing to humble himself, willing to reach out and grab a hold of Jesus in faith, trusting that Jesus could give him what he needed. And it worked. It worked for Jairus, it worked for the unnamed woman, and it can work for us. We have a choice. We can be like the crowd, a bunch of people curious about this whole faith thing, along for the show, occasionally bumping into Christ along the way, but never really engaging Jesus, never really grabbing on to faith in any substantial way. We'll still have some cool experiences, and we may even see some miracles happen for other people along the way. But we won't be getting our whole blessing. We won't be completely changed like the people in our reading today. Or we can take a cue from them, reach out, grab a hold, and fully engage ourselves with Jesus. We can intentionally seek him out and walk closely with him, and we can grab all the healing he offers us. Healing from insecurity, healing from self-doubt, healing from fears, if-onlys, and what-ifs. The choice is ours. The power to receive is ours. The gift of wholeness has always been waiting for us. Jesus said that he came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. Every day we get to decide, do we want that abundant life? Are we going to reach out for it today? Or will we be like the crowd, content to watch others receive the miracles? May we be willing to boldly reach for the healing Jesus offers us. May we be willing to let go of our weaknesses and limitations in favor of wholeness. May we be restored to the wholeness God intended for each of us. Amen.